There's no manuscript for today's sermon, which I do from time to time. When I do that, I usually practice before I get here on Katie, and today, Katie was cutting my hair as I was delivering the sermon the first time around, and it was a total disaster. The sermon, not the hair. I hope. Which gives you a sense of my priorities, I suppose. My hair is way more important than your spiritual life. But actually, today I hope to save your life. Or perhaps not save your life, but give you the opportunity to save your own life. And I will begin by telling you a terrible story about, it's not really a story, but, I'm your minister, and so hopefully you don't ever see me lose my cool. My role with you all shapes me. Not just my behavior, but actually shapes my mind and my heart. And it is a powerful and wonderful thing. I am grateful for it. But I am not my family's minister. I do not have that helpful watchdog of a role with me in those moments where I'm a lot more relaxed, my guard is down, and in some ways that means I am more vulnerable to my own reactivity. And as many of you know, I have 3-year-olds. And they are, as we were talking about earlier today, Ann, they are late bloomers. They did not have terrible twos. They now know how to push Papa's buttons. And for some reason they enjoy it, even though their enjoyment sometimes looks a lot like a complete meltdown. At least that's what it seems like. And when they're having a meltdown and I'm tired, it's the end of the day, I want my space. I want my evening to go the way that I want it to go, and they are freaking out. I lose my cool. I get angry. I get angry. And afterwards, I feel, of course, terrible. I'm glad to see some of you nodding your heads. I'm hoping that means you're sympathetic rather than being like, yep, you get angry. But it's terrible. It's terrible. I do not want my girls. And I know, I can see them learning that anger. I don't want that. So, what's happening here is that I don't have the role to reinforce some other avenue, and I'm sort of operating on automatic pilot. This is an automatic response. I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, it would be good right now if I totally, lost my stuff in front of my daughter and made her feel terrible for it. That is not my plan. This is coming from a deeper place, some of which is my experience at being alive in this world. Some of it is inherited that we share, our reptilian brain. We've used the metaphor of the elephant and the rider before, where the rider is our consciousness and our awareness anyway, and the elephant is our subconsciousness. And our subconsciousness has so much more power than our consciousness. And the main job of the elephant, evolutionarily, is to notice a stick and see if that stick is a stick or a snake. And if it's a snake, to run like hell. And if it's a stick, just to keep on going. But it's constantly doing this. And sometimes a snake or a stick looks like a snake, and we still run from that stick, even though it's just a stick. So we have this conditioned response to stimuli that comes to us from our primordial roots. It also is then, because it's the framework for our experience, This also tends to be how we just kind of see the world normally, and our experience reinforces our experience. So it's not just stuff in the past that's making us act like insane elephants. It's what we're doing right now continues to teach ourselves to behave like crazed elephants. With my girls, I know why I am annoyed. I could identify why I'm annoyed. You're annoying me because I would rather be resting right now. But to go from being annoyed to totally losing my cool is completely out of proportion to what's happening. That is not rooted in any sort of consciousness. That is rooted in a pre-consciousness. And somehow my reptilian brain is misperceiving my petulant child as a threat to my life. And I'm going, why, elephant? Why do you think this kid is threatening my life? What is it? Well, maybe, this is speculation, but maybe it goes back to, if you're in the trees and your child is screaming, that's alerting all of the predators in the neighborhood to where you are. It is also, maybe there's some sort of stuff that I've got to do to get through the day to make sure that we live again tomorrow. And this crazy 3-year-old, or 2 of them, is making it impossible to accomplish those functions. Or maybe, it's just out of place with my expectations of normalcy, which is creating a sort of cognitive dissonance in my reality. This is not the reality that I have expected to have. And on some level, that is existentially scary. And so I freak out. And how I interpret that moment, that snake or stick in the guise of a toddler, how I interpret that reinforces evolution's paradigm. So I'm conditioned to I it, right? In the terms of Martin Buber, I'm conditioned to I it and to react to that stimulus automatically. This is how we are here today. This is how we survived, the millennia where we were not on the top of the food chain. So the idea is that that kind of stimulus and response is protective and eventually procreative, but in fact, in today's era, it is actually killing us. Quite literally killing us. The stimulus response automatic pilot idea and dynamic basically causes an undue amount of stress in our lives. Now, stress used to be a good thing. It kept us aware of the tigers. If you went to get a drink in the river and a crocodile emerged from the river, you were running for your life. Adrenaline kicked in. You were not thinking about it. You took off, right? So there are people doing research on stress, and one of them is this fellow named Robert Sapolsky. He's a biologist at Stanford, and he has a quote that I found rather entertaining. He says, when that alligator emerges from the creek, you need to turn off anything that is non-essential. This includes growth, reproduction, and he says, running for your life, this is no time to ovulate. You turn off your tissue repair ability. It's like an amazing superpower, right? I have the power to repair tissue. We do, and we turn it off when we're freaked out. We do it later if there is a later. So we turn on the same stress response. We turn on that very same stress response for non-physiological reasons, for reasons that are not life and death, for just straight psychological, emotional reasons. Do it all the time. So we'll talk about the cause of that emotional stress in a moment. I just want to hammer home, I want to stress you out, actually. I want to hammer home the consequences of stress. And I guess there were two seminal studies, at least that I know about. One was with baboons in Africa, and one was with civil servants in London. There's a joke there, but so in the civil service in London, they're ranked. You get a ranking of, I think it's 1 through 5, and if you're either a 1 or a 5, you have a lot more power and privilege in that system than the ones. I mean, it's a straight up ranking. Everyone has the same health care. Everyone has the same sort of benefits, but your ranking is very hierarchical. And in a baboon group, typically there is also a strict hierarchy. And the alpha males get all the perks, and everyone's smaller than them. It's not so great. So, what does this do? Well, in the baboons, the have-nots have increased heart rates and higher blood pressure. They have compromised immune systems and reproductive systems. They suffer depression more frequently. And their arteries have more arterial plaque. Their fat tends to be redistributed to the midsection. In Whitehall, it was the exact same thing. Straight down the line. So we have two groups of primates that are in hierarchical organizations, and the people on the bottom are suffering, or not even on the bottom, the people not on the top are suffering these stress indicators. And these stress indicators, by the way, lead to heart attack, shorter life expectancy, depression. Also, stress, and now we are way beyond my level of actual understanding, so I'm just relaying information. Stress shortens a genetic structure called a telomere, which is like a little hat on the end of a chromosome. And if you don't have the telomere, or if it's shortening up, the chromosome starts to fray. So this is basically degeneration. Cellular degeneration. Is that right, Tom?
You do it fine.
Okay.
Don't stress.
I'd rather... the alpha baboon over here. So cellular degeneration. This is shortening your life. It is shortening your life on several, there's lots of opportunities in stress for your life to be shortened. Okay, so to recap, stress kills. It's produced by a couple of things. Automaticity, autopilot, this conditioned response, and having things not happen that way. So this is a response, a reptilian level response to a threat, of which in social creatures, hierarchy is one. It is a threat, and it is constant when in effect. And so we get stress from this combination of autopilot and hierarchy. There is an antidote, and everybody has it. The antidote is compassion and mindfulness, which, oddly enough, wind up being the same thing. So in baboons and people, biologists have found, spiritual leaders found this out a long time ago, and the scientists are catching up. But they have found that compassion leads to a better and longer life. Biologists have found that compassion releases an enzyme that seems to increase the length of the telomeres, the little caps that go on the end of your chromosomes. So if we need scientific evidence of it, there, I suppose it is. So compassion keeps your chromosomes from fraying. So compassion. To have compassion, you need to be in some community and have a positive connection. Right? Positive connection is not possible without compassion. So here's the trick. Your internal reality, right, is made of your interactions with the world. Your internal reality, what you think is reality, is created by your interactions with the world, your interpretations of what you are experiencing. Thus, your positive connection with people, your positive connection, your compassion with the world is a positive connection with those experiences that we call the self. Your positive connection with people is a positive connection with that experience that we call the self. So there is a hierarchy in society, and in our society we operate in multiple hierarchies. There's also a hierarchy in our own mind. And stress comes from there too. You know it's in effect every time you hear yourself say the word should. That reflects a tension between what actually is happening and what you think should happen, and reveals the hierarchy of conditioning and of ego. So this brings us to mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is sensing what is, and also sensing one's own judgments, noticing these feelings come and they go. Why does noticing that these feelings, these judgments come and go? Why does that help? Well, it helps because your mind is a social structure, or has a social structure to it. Not sure of the verb there, but it's a social structure. The same neural networks light up in mindfulness practitioners when they're practicing mindfulness meditation as light up when people are having a good time with each other. There is a social, it's a social function, where those two things are, or socialness is a mindful function. So, in a way, mindfulness can be conceived of as a relationship with the self. When you're mindful meditating, your social networks are firing. Who are you being social with? You're being social with yourself. And in the same way that when you are vibing with somebody, and you know a new person that's going to be your friend, you have that sense, that attunement. That's what mindfulness meditation is supposed to bring about. That sense of attunement with yourself. And by the way, you are not going to be in tune with a person unless there is some compassion between the two of you. And in the same way, you're not going to be in tune with yourself unless you are being compassionate to yourself, non-judgmental of the thoughts that come in and out of your mind. So the benefits of mindfulness almost read like the opposite of the detriments of stress, right? It reduces suffering. It improves your immunity. It accelerates your healing, which can do nothing else but nurture your well-being. So this is great, and you can all do it. And the question is how? Do you have to sit cross-legged with arms in a certain position? You do not have to do that. I think actually it helps, because if I have to hold my hands like this for 20 minutes, I kind of have to focus on my hands, and it helps me to not focus on and get distracted by other things that are going on. So I actually enjoy setting aside that time and having a posture, but you don't have to. The main thing that you have to do is just observe yourself. It's about self-observation. And not just observing your behavior, but observing your thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Because when you observe your thoughts, your feelings, and sensations, which, by the way, we've done today, when you do that, you become aware of the automatic nature of the elephant. You become aware. All right? So the elephant starts to freak out because there's a stick. It could be a snake. But because you're aware of that, you're aware that that's happened before, you don't have to get taken for the ride that the elephant wants to take you on. When you hear a should, you could just identify that as part of the hierarchy. You know that that can come and go. Let it go. You don't have to be trampled by the elephant of shoulds. This enables you to disconnect from the automatic response mechanism. It disempowers the elephant. It empowers the rider. It subverts autopilot and hopefully leaves you with this sense of, about yourself, curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. And all you have to do is notice. You don't have to dispel the thoughts. If you notice the thoughts coming, if you see them coming, and you note them, they'll go away. You don't have to force them anywhere. You don't have to beat yourself up. We're treating ourselves with compassion. And I can speak to this because I have been practicing mindfulness meditation. I practice for like 10 minutes every, about 4 days a week I practice. For about 10 minutes. And even with that, I find myself, when I'm not doing that, able to do that, to note thoughts that are coming in. And I'm not going to say I never get angry with the core or many anymore, but I am much better at noting when that moment is about to happen. I'm much better at noting. And then I could even walk them through it with me. And I could teach them how to do it themselves, because now they're seeing their dad about to get angry. Notice he's about to get angry and diffuse himself and not beat myself up for it. I want them to learn quicker. And Viktor Frankl said that between stimulus and response there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. One of you has that as your signature on your email. Or maybe many of you do. Some of you do. So that's where I stole it from, was your emails. But it's great. It's saying exactly what we're talking about here. And the question for me is freedom from what? Well, freedom from everything. Not political freedom. I mean, if you take freedom down to its essence, political freedom is, and freedom of will is not the issue. It's freedom to choose the quality of your experience. Freedom to choose the quality of your experience. There's a former Buddhist monk and mindfulness expert named Andy Puddicombe, and he gave a TED Talk, and during that TED Talk he said, we can't change every little thing that happens to us in life, but we can change how we experience it. And to my way of thinking, that's about all we have control over, and yet it will wind up influencing your entire life. In fact, my faith is that it will eventually begin to influence the elephant. And that will then shift your frame. And now, instead of the frame reinforcing this negative cycle of automatic response, you've got your frame reinforcing the positive cycle of decoupled automaticity. You're walking through the roses now. You heard about the rose. It's a great reading. You're walking through a garden, and you're seeing in your mind, it's seeing flower, 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 flower. You know, you could just see this bouquet as a bunch of flowers, right? You've got that category. You can go on with your day. If you stop for a moment and investigate each one of these flowers, you will have a far deeper experience. And so that's what this 10 minutes, 4 times a week is teaching me and allowing me to at least note that I have that opportunity to do that at some point. So that's where mindfulness affects us as individuals. So mindfulness is relationship. The question that I have today particularly is then relationship mindfulness. Because we have an opportunity to not only be compassionate with ourselves here at Mountain Vista, we have the opportunity to be compassionate with each other. And in fact, that opportunity is acute today. Because today we are wheeling out our new pastoral care network. And thanks to a lot of hard work from Betty and Samar and Susan, Leon, they've recast and reconfigured our pastoral care network. And the opportunity for you is that as you leave, and in Goldblatt today, there will be a table. You could sign up to be a friend indeed. This is somebody who can take food, can take a person to a doctor's appointment, or just companion a person for a little while. This is an opportunity for you to increase those compassionate frameworks, which will then refit your enzymes with the telomeres and allow you to be mindful and compassionate with one another and create a very positive feedback loop. So please, today, I ask that you be here for yourself as you are here for each other, and be here for each other as you are here for yourself. I think Susan will be at the table in Goldblatt, and I encourage each of you to introduce yourself to her. I hope that you all may experience the sensation of curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. Note your feelings, note your thoughts. Don't judge. Find your